free agency. That's how. Let's put it this way. That's how on thin ice he has been, and and I've never covered anything like that, where you just know that the GM that usually you want around for a long, long time is in that precarious of a position. But in terms of reporting, a lot of phone calls, a lot of texts, a lot of making sure that I'm getting it completely accurate, and again, I hate that I'm like constantly just piling up on him, but it was so easy to get info on him this whole season because because of the way he treats people. I mean, it's an open book right now, and now hopefully everything will be buttoned up, and I hope my job's still easy, but the reality is that the state of dysfunction around this team in this league, it's just been very, very easy to get information. And that's what I've always told him, when he's accusing like one or two people of being sources of mine. And then, frankly, he got rid of a couple of them, and I was still breaking every story. I would be like, see, that you just cost a guy his job when I'm still getting the stories. Essentially, give me some more credit. I've covered the league for now 20-something years. So to me, yesterday, as stressful as it was, it wasn't hard, to say it easily. I mean, when he was fired, which is around 10:40 in the morning, I mean, holy mackerel, the amount of texts and calls I got from agents, players, people, around the league. It just went like wildfire. In fact, I'm amazed it took so long. I'm amazed between the 10:45 that he was fired and me publishing the story at 12:06 that nobody else got it, because it was crazy how many people just immediately came to me like that hey, this happened, that also says about the state of the team here and why this probably had to happen. From the respect level, there wasn't a ton of it.
I wrote today about some of the precedents in recent Minnesota history. People who were obviously bad at their jobs, they still held on for 3 or 4 years. The only person I could think of who got fired really quickly was Fran Foley with the Vikings, and not only was he kind of all the things Fenton was, but he also falsified his resume, so when they had a smoking gun, they could say, okay, you're done, and he did this, you're gone. I mean, it was just simple,
Right.
Usually, it's hard to get fired as general manager because to get the job, you have to convince somebody you have a long-term plan, and the owner wants to believe in that long-term plan, or they wouldn't hire you in the first place. So, can you think of a hockey precedent of somebody being fired?
Well, I mean, the only one I could think of, which was a bizarre one, was in 2006. Neil Smith was fired in 5 weeks over the summer, and Gar Snow took over with the Islanders. Tom Rowe is the only one in recent history that I could think of in Florida where he was like, GM, and then they made him the coach, or he made himself the coach, and then at the end of that year he was gone, and so he wasn't in Florida a long time, and that was a disaster. But I can't think of anything like this, and part of the problem here was it just felt like he just always shot from the hip, that there was no thinking about, there was no reasoning for a lot. We've talked about this all year long. Yep. There's just been no evidence that there was a plan. It was so many rookie mistakes. I mean, the Anthony Bitetto one is the one that I keep on going back to. You cannot, as a GM, the day after adding Brad Hunt, when the team is on fire, go and then next day, just because you like the player from Nashville, claim him off waivers, and now take a team that was absolutely on fire, had won 3 straight road games, just had these impressive wins in Vegas and Colorado back-to-back, and now completely overhaul the roster. One real reason why that team was on fire back in January was because of that fourth line of, I think, Eriksson, Greenway, and Cunnin. So now all of a sudden you make this move. You not only send Cunnin and Greenway down to the minors where they get no All-Star break now. Okay, so they're already pissed. Okay, like they've been playing all year long, and now they're the only ones that don't get a little refresher here. But now what you do is you can't recall them. So then what happens is now you come back from the break, you lose your first couple games. Now you got to repair a mistake by putting J.T. Brown and Nate Prosser on waivers. So now you have a locker room that's pissed that Prosser's gone. So then you go to Buffalo and you say to Bruce Boudreau, hey, I want Bitetto in the lineup. So now you take Nick Seeler, who is playing his ass off, and you say he's scratched now. And it was such a mistake that I still just I look at that as being the turning point of the season. I mean, you look at what happened there, and it was just a colossal 3 week. It triggered like 3 weeks worth of moves that didn't need to happen, all because he was not listening to his staff that was saying, "Wait a minute," So that was one of them, and it was always like that. He singularly focused on getting Kevin Fiala. No rhyme or reason for Fitz. No saying, we need a right wing. So it was constant. My favorite one so far is that Kevin Fiala is suddenly a natural right wing. Like, what? Like, then I go and, me with analytics, I'm not the biggest, I'm not like, like when I'm kind of like, frankly, like Paul like this, like you don't like analytics if you don't understand it. That's kind of like me with analytics. But I went back and I studied shift charts and everything of Kevin Fiala because I knew he played left wing only in Nashville the last couple of years. But then I looked at his entire career, and unless they play some wacky freaking system in Nashville, when he leaves his zone, in Nashville, he was always a left wing. And that's, frankly, it's kind of the only way you could figure stuff like that out, unless you have somebody that's like, unless you can call up Peter Laviolette and say, hey, where have you been, which I don't have that type of relationship with Peter. So I looked at these shot charts and exit charts, and I'm like, this guy is not a right wing. He's never been. So how now suddenly is he a natural right wing? So that was kind of a big one. Like I'm doing power play units yesterday, and even just now, like you're figuring out the power play units, and you're looking at if Zuccarello, Parisi, and Stahl are unit one with, let's say, Dunbar and Suter. What is your second unit? Because like first of all, they can't all be there. I'm not saying the Wild are like overabundance of talent here, but you look at it and you got Fiala, Donato, you have Zucker, you have Greenway, you have Cunnin. I got to think you're going to want a right shot on the power play, so there's Cunnin. Well, now up front. So now, who's not on the power play? But like, is Fiala suddenly going to have to play the point if Zucker and Donato are up front? And then does Spurgeon get left off? Does that definitely mean Greenway can't be on it? Like, and then you look at it and you're like, all those left shot guys kind of play the same position on the power play. They all want to play the half wall, and this is like stuff that should be elementary stuff for a GM to figure out, and he just never did. It's like, you figure it out. The Spurgeon thing, another rookie mistake. A major mistake. I asked him in Iowa in my Q&A with him. I said, do you think that you need to quickly get in front of Jared Spurgeon and find out what it's going to cost to sign him? And he said, no. And then what he does is at the first time at the draft, he sits down with him, or sits down with his agent to just have our first conversation. Well, how do you, as a GM, have your first conversation at the draft when that is when the only time you could really trade him so the second you get past the draft, now they got all the leverage because they know you probably can't trade him the rest of the summer. So that made no sense. And then they waited and they waited and they waited, and now what happens? Jacob Trouba signs for $8 million. So now that $6.3 million that they originally went to him with is just not even in the marketplace anymore. So then they offered him more than money, and that's still below market value technically. And so now the new GM is going to have to handle that problem. I mean, these are just, it just, whether it's inexperience or just, or I don't know what it was, but it just, from a GM standpoint, it just wasn't smart, and sometimes I just believe it's because he just put himself alone on an island, and he got rid of a lot of the trusted people that would have been the ones saying, we got to get going on this, and instead in the office right now, there's few people that would say that to him. So
I'm going to throw a curveball question to you.
I don't even remember what your question was.
It doesn't really matter, does it? It never really matters what the actual question is. Yes, hi.
And one reason why I do I'm talking like this is because it's like I feel bad that they were in this position. These are major mistakes, and it's set this franchise back, and that's why I'm glad. I think that. And I normally don't talk about this about people. I try to be much more professional than I'm being here and sort of whining. But I'm glad that Craig had the guts to admit his mistake and get going on this and just change it up.
But your job is to be honest. Yeah, so you're being honest.
And that's the thing right. Is that another year of this and the damage could have been really, really bad. So they are trying to get this team to a new place, move on, start a new chapter, and get somebody in here that can really take control of this thing. And I do applaud them for that. I think that it was the right move, even though the timing of it was very peculiar.
we have a special guest question coming up. I do want to wrap up some business here. First of all, Russo's Filter, you know him from Twitter, is giving away tickets to the August 9th Lynx game. He came in town a couple years back, and he and Brandon went to a Lynx game, and they loved it. They had a blast. I love it. Cheryl Reeves does a podcast with me on this network. I think it's a great atmosphere. If you like basketball at all, come up and just fill out this and just write links on the top along with your other information, and we will get the tickets to the winner of that drawing. Also want to thank BiteSquad, bitesquad.com, BiteSquad, the app. Use the promo code TALKNORTH to get your first delivery fee waived. Just keep using it after that because they've been a great supporter of the network. So BiteSquad, bitesquad.com. They're delivering for morning, noon, and night now. You can sign up for the member program, $5.99 a month. They'll deliver for free anywhere within a 4-mile radius. They keep adding good restaurants. I highly recommend it. And now, fire away.
I'm Paris, and I just have 2 questions. The first one is, when you saw Leopold at the draft, I mean, you must have started having that feeling if you didn't already, kind of that he was babysitting, more or less. And then before that, when he first came on with the Wild, did you start having a feeling right away that?
Yeah.
Questions.
I mean, I don't want to get too inside baseball here, but I mean, I've had a feeling since I met him in 2009. We didn't have a very good intro in 2009. And that was during the last GM search, but I will say that, like, when he was hired, I was sort of excited because I did have a relationship with him. I have a really good friend that worked for the Nashville Predators until this past February or March, and now he's in Columbus. But he loved Paul. Now, they weren't in the same department or anything like that, but he always just had great things to say. So whenever I would be covering a Nashville game, this person that worked for the Predators is my best friend in the whole world. I'd go and hang out with him before the game, and Paul would always come up and chit-chat. One time I was doing that, and Paul was like, hey, I got, basically gave me a scoop. David Quinn's here to surprise Jordan Greenway for his first ever game. So, we had really good kind of interactions the last couple of years. And so when he was hired, I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And then right from the first feature that I worked on him, he couldn't have been more, couldn't have been tougher to work with him. And it's just kind of been that way. And then my first interaction with him at the draft, we got off to an awful start. I mean, awful. I broke that story that they were going to trade that Zucker and Niederreiter for Dvorak, Domi, and Ennis was in the deal, and he freaked out. Just freaked, and on his staff, on me, and it was just bad. And from that point on, I just think he was a Nashville. He's never been in a position like this. He's never had to deal with media. The media in Nashville is very different than the way that we are here in Minnesota, and the way that I certainly am in terms of aggressively pursuing news and things like that. And so it got really tough. And in terms of at the draft. I would say yes. By Leopold being, it wasn't so much that Leopold was at his right hand at the table. It was more the stuff that he's in scouting meetings and that he's asking questions to the amateur scouts. And that to me seemed to be an owner that's like really trying to ask questions. So, there was, what's that? Yeah, he was. I mean, and a lot of that had to do with, I think he was very concerned about the amateur scouting staff. He was very concerned that, to say it bluntly, that PJ was put into this position of running, the draft and things like that, or co-running the draft. And so I do deep down think that Craig was doing, his antenna was up, is the way that I would describe it, and that he's been trying to, really figure out what was going on. Behind the scenes in the organization, there have been, staff members talked to the last 2-3 months, really as they were trying to figure out how do they improve the morale of, a very down group. So.
Is PJ still going to stalk you?
Well, no, because I ran into him in Munich.
Yeah, you ran into him in Munich.
And I will say, with PJ, I feel bad for him. I mean, he's sort of now in this position where just there's perceptions out there that he can't do the job. He's a longtime hockey guy, and he's still going to be part of this organization unless he decides to leave, which I if I'm him, I wouldn't. If I don't know how many years he's got left on his contract, but this was his first year with the team, so I got to think he's got 2-3 years of guaranteed money left. I'd take it if I had a young family, and so I think he's going to be still part of it. And now, and so it's got to be awkward, and